Everybody, Lieutenant Joe here for the Blue Heart Podcast. We are sponsored by the fantastic Blue360media.com, the greatest publisher for law enforcement in the world. Everything you need, you can find at Blue360 Media, including my two books, The Interview and The Interrogation. And also medicalessentialdiagnostics.com, medicalessentialdiagnostics.com. They have 5 offices in New Jersey. All first responders can go there at no cost to you. Get yourself health screened, save your life when you're working, and enjoy your pension. And you can bring 2 adults with you from your family. Keep everybody healthy. They're our sponsors. Go take a good look at them. So today I want to talk a couple of minutes about how we as law enforcement can work with our schools and help them to maintain a safer environment. You know, I was doing a class the other day on juvenile investigations. And we're talking about kids and how kids today are different and the things that go on. And we have a lot of violence that kids, when I was younger, kids didn't do the things they do. You know, they broke mailboxes, they did vandalism, stuff like that. Today, kids are committing murders. Kids are doing robberies, rape, sexual assaults. It's a different world. If you're a juvenile officer, you got your hands full. But in the course of the program, when we were talking, I was going through it and I said, you know, the danger of a school shooting is something that every district has to address, and every police department that's going to respond has got to be prepared to work with their schools and to help them. Because here's what I find. I do threat assessments for schools and businesses, churches, camps, everywhere. Any people get together, I do an assessment, tell them where their security gaps are. And what I find out there is that with lots and lots of schools, they do not have a great relationship with law enforcement. I hear all the time that, well, you know, the police, they don't really come around. The police don't really like us. The police don't show up. The police do this, the police do that, blah, 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 back and forth. And one of the things that I can do when I'm doing my assessment is I reach out to the local police and I speak to them. I try and have a meeting to understand what is it that you do to keep the schools safe? How do you interact with them? What's your relationship? All of that kind of thing. Kind of bridge the gap so that the schools have someone to talk to, a connection, right? Because if something happens in one of those schools, you're going to be responding there, and it could be life and death. And when it comes to school shootings, here's how you could wrap your head around it. Right now, I'm going to say there are probably about 250,000 schools in America. And each year since the pandemic, school shootings have doubled. Now, I mean real school shootings, not gangbangers running through the parking lot throwing rounds at each other. That's not a real school shooting. It happens on school property, but it's not a school shooting. A real school shooting is when somebody pops up in the lunchroom with a gun and starts killing their classmates, or somebody tries to bust into the school to go in and kill people and hurt people. That's a school shooting. So since the pandemic, there's been between 50 and 60 a year. That's double that what it was before the pandemic, because everyone's suffering from the effects of that pandemic, the shutdown, especially the kids. You know, kids have been really goofed up by this thing. And it's coming out in the statistics, crime statistics, and things that people are doing. So when I hear this about schools, that they don't connect with the police, I'm offering you some advice. Make sure that they know what to do, right? Because you think they do, they might not practice good drills. Go over there and help them with the drills. Monitor the drills. Maybe use a role player at the drills to start things off. Role player goes in, starts yelling and screaming, whatever. But look at their drills and figure out how you can help them. Can you give them some advice? Number 2, do your officers go to the schools? Do they walk through the buildings? When I was doing the training in my agency, we had a lot of officers, and the high school was a prominent place. But you know what? If there was a shooting in the science wing, more than half of my cops did not attend the high school. And they only went there for a call. If somebody called and said there was something going on, they wouldn't know where the science wing was. So what we talk about in school safety and security is that time equals life. So when you have to get to the school and then get to the specific location where the shooter might be, you need to know the building inside and out. So you want to make sure you arrange for your officers to take a tour of the school. Go there regularly. When I became a school security director here in New Jersey, one of the things I did is put pots of coffees in the schools so that the cops could stop by and have a cup of coffee. right? You want to make that connection is what I'm saying. Make a connection to the school. Make sure your officers go there. Run drills when there's nobody in the building, and then maybe run a drill that involves your officers when there are people in the building. And consider that relationship important, right? One of the things I found when I went to the schools from law enforcement is that we have a tendency as cops, law enforcement people, to go in and want to cop everybody. This is how you should do it. Do this and do that. What I found is that in the school, there's a completely different culture in the school than there is in law enforcement. And if you're going to go in and try and interact with them properly so that you can actually make things better, have suggestions, work with them, you need to understand the school culture, what goes on in the school. What do they think is important? What do they think are things that they should be doing, right? So that's where that relationship is so important. So, and don't just go by what you might think or what your chief might think of your relationship. You got to find out from the schools. So chief, if you're listening, find out what do the schools think about the relationship with your officers and your agency. You might think it's great, and they might think it's not so great. And in an emergency, when something bad happens, you're going to be there. So here's how I can gauge the level of concern you should have. There's 250,000 schools and 50 to 60 real active shooter incidents a year. So if you do the math and you put 60 shootings into 250,000 buildings, you say to yourself, well, the chances of anything ever really happening is really very, very small, statistically. Absolutely right. But here's a question I've been asking for 15 years, and I'll ask it to you right now. When and where will the next school shooting take place? When and where? Joe at pangarotraining.com. Send me an email and tell me, hey, Lieutenant, this is when and where the next one's going to take place, because then I'm going to be there and I'll be a hero. I'll save the day because I know it's coming, right? The reality is we don't know when it's coming. We have no idea where it's going to be or when it's going to be. So when you take that reality and you look at the number of 50 to 60 school shootings where people are going to get hurt and killed, the reality is more like 50-50. It's going to happen in your school or it's not. And you had better be prepared. You better be aware of the danger. You better work with the schools. You better work with your officers and be prepared, because you know what? The next violent attack in a school is only days or minutes away. So that's my advice to everybody. Get to know your schools, walk through the schools, talk to the people in the schools. If you have a great relationship with your schools and you're there all the time, good for you. That's fantastic. But if you don't, or you're not sure, do yourself, your officers, and your entire community a favor by getting in there, get to know the schools, know the people, and help them practice, help them to be safe. All right, so that's our word of the day today with Lieutenant Joe on school safety and security and law enforcement. It's a partnership. We have to work together to keep the kids safe. We'll see you the next time.